Hello, everyone, and welcome to the No More Week 2024 Silicon Saviors or Digital Threats, Exploring Tech's Impact on Domestic and Sexual Violence, session number 7, No More Silence, Tech Safe Havens for Survivors. My name is Taylor Miller, she, her, and I'm the Outreach and Social Media Manager with Speak Your Truth Today. And I'm so excited to be moderating this session. But before we begin, let me just go over some general housekeeping. We are so grateful y'all joined us today. You'll notice that you're signed in as a participant. This means that your camera and microphone are disabled. If you have any questions for our guests today, you can use the Q&A box. Today's session will also be recorded for future reference. The contents of our session may be a little bit triggering for some, so if you'd like to reach out for support, feel free to check out the No More Global Directory. It's a global directory of folks specialized in offering domestic and sexual violence services. We'll be putting a link for that in the chat. And we hope you just enjoy today's conversation. I feel absolutely honored to introduce our wonderful panelists today. They are all experts in the field with years of experience and passion towards supporting survivors. I'm going to start off the introductions by introducing my fellow team member, the incredible Hannah Hollander. Hannah is the founder and executive director of Speak Your Truth Today. After escaping abuse in 2018, Hannah shared her story on Facebook, hoping to educate her community about domestic violence. Little did she know that that post would go viral, leading her to create Speak Your Truth. We're excited to hear more about that. Our next panelist is Kyle Linton. I've had the absolute pleasure of working more closely with Kyle over the past year. He is a trauma-informed tech genius and the executive director and co-founder of R-Wave. He was inspired to start R-Wave after his loved one experienced sexual assault in 2018. Our next panelist is No More's Global Director of Partnerships, Melissa Morbeck. Melissa has extensively worked with intergovernmental organizations, private sectors, global NGOs in domestic and sexual violence prevention, some of those including being a formal specialist advisor to the White House on violence against women and a board member for the National Network to End Domestic Violence. We are absolutely honored to have you in our space with us today. We also are expecting another panelist who I believe will join us in a little bit. She is the incredible Begonia Castro Vasquez. She's the program manager of the Regional Program Partnerships for the Prevention of Violence Against Women and Girls in Southern Africa. She's going to tell us all about No Kanang, which is an app created for women to talk and connect about gender-based violence. So we really have an incredible lineup today. Really awesome folks. I'm so excited for this conversation and to see where it goes. Before we jump into the questions, I want to give a little bit of a brief about the different digital spaces and safe havens we'll be talking about today. We have 3 platforms which we want to highlight. One is the Speak Your Truth Today support group, which is a private gender inclusive Facebook support group, which now serves close to 19,000 survivors worldwide through abuse education, networking resources, providing intentional peer-to-peer support. This support group has been able to help about 3 people every week leave their abusive relationships. The next platform we're going to talk about is our No More Silence Speak Your Truth collaborative effort between Speak Your Truth Today, R-Wave, and No More. It's an anonymous platform that allows survivors of sexual domestic violence to share their stories, read other folks' stories, submit artwork, review educational materials, and get all the resources that they need. And then the last app we want to talk about is Nakangan, which is an app dedicated to create a safe and empowering supportive space for women to share their experiences and exchange information and access resources in South Africa. So those are our 3 platforms that you'll hear our guests speak a little bit more about in detail and expand on how we created them and what they function as today. But with that, I'm excited to jump right into our questions. And I'm going to kick it off with you, Hannah. Hannah, I would love to hear from you around how technology platforms have been instrumental in creating a global network of domestic violence survivors, both offering a supportive environment for open discussions and shared experiences.
Well, thank you, Taylor. Thank you so much for the kind introductions. I'm super excited to chat with everyone here today. I love this topic. I think that it's so important to talk about technology and how we're supporting survivors and improving that support going forward as technology advances. So, I think we can all agree technology platforms have evolved quite a bit in the last 2 decades. Since its inception, I think people have always been using it to connect with others, from the very early chat rooms to our social media platforms today, and even new created apps. It's amazing what we're able to do with technology. So, I have seen survivors use technology to connect and find others with shared experiences from all over the world. And I think that's really powerful. I think that there's a lot of reasons why survivors and people turn to online for support. And some of those reasons might be, they might have a lack of resources locally. They might feel like they can get answers to their questions quicker than maybe calling up a hotline, and that may be less exposure for them as well. Online might provide more resources or more accessible support that's lacking in their real life. We have surveyed our members and found that nearly 50% of our users are disabled in some way, and that's a huge community that are experiencing additional barriers and seeking support. So technology improves that for them. And then in our community, as well as others, there's an ability to be anonymous, which I think is a huge reason why people turn to online for support. They're able to get answers and receive support without outing themselves or their situation. So, I have seen amazing things happen when survivors come together. And within our support group, we've seen the education that happens survivor to survivor when they're sharing about their experiences, and the healing that happens with those shared experiences, especially afterwards. But also what I find, probably one of the most important things is the empowerment that happens for survivors when they find those shared experiences. In our group, we have survivors from all walks of their journey out of abuse. We have survivors that are still in relationships, still figuring out if what they're experiencing is abusive. And then we have survivors that are, 10, 20 years out and wanting to give back and wanting to educate and encourage those that are still figuring things out and still in the thick of it. So there's this really beautiful, and then we also get a lot of posts like, when they bought their first house or bought their first car, or these beautiful like celebration posts afterwards, the firsts, of after and healing and leaving. And so I feel like that gives such a beacon of hope for those that are still really going through it. So I think when survivors tell other survivors, me too, you're not alone, like that's really powerful. And technology enables us to do that at such a greater scale. So I'm a huge fan, and I'm excited to continue talking about this topic.
Yes, I think all of us are. And thank you for sharing that. I feel like you put that so beautifully. And I just want to emphasize, I love how you highlighted kind of like the intergenerational like community within the support group, which I also think is hard to find in person and in our local community. So I love that idea of just connecting with everybody who's there. I know one concern we often hear when talking about digital advocacy and creating safe spaces for survivors online is about safety. I want to hear how both of you prioritize safety and confidentiality of the folks who are participating in your support group or online digital spaces.
Yeah, totally. Well, I can jump in here quickly and then obviously pass it back to Hannah. Just quick background. I'm the executive director of an organization called Our-Wave. We provide online spaces for survivors of sexual violence to safely and anonymously share their stories. And we've actually created a really beautiful partnership with No More and Speak Your Truth Today to provide one of these custom experiences for the survivors that they work with in their networks to have a safe space to go and then access those resources. And when it comes to sort of prioritizing safety and security of survivors, We come from a tech background on our team at Our Wave. And so we're oftentimes leaning heavily into how do we make sure, first and foremost, that survivors understand what they're sharing with us and can only share a limited amount of information that keeps them the most safe. So there's sort of different ways we think about it. It's one, most importantly, what are the survivors' preferences in terms of the data that they share with us? Make sure everything is always opt-in for that individual survivor that is sharing their story and providing other information and to us. And then two, it's how do we fulfill our obligations to make sure that the information that we are collecting is stored as safely as possible. So encryption in transit, encryption in rest, for administrative tools, how do we make sure that we are setting up multi-factor authentication? How do we follow the best in practice security protocols and procedures to make sure that we're protecting and being diligent with this survivor data that's being shared with us? But I do think that there is a huge opportunity for us to take this data that's being collected anonymously and to improve public policy, to take on research collaborations. And we've done some of that work with some large academic institutions and national and international groups. So I certainly think that there is a line that you can toe where you are protecting survivors as much as possible, while still, having some room to do some other things that can benefit the space. Sorry, Hannah, did you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. We come from a little bit different perspective than you. I love hearing when you talk because it's very inspiring of how I don't know how the back end works and how all of you guys do that. So it's just incredible what you're able to do for survivors and create that safety. We are working in the Facebook platform, so we have a lot of workarounds to try to maintain safety with our members as much as possible. And we always say safety is like our #1 priority. I think the biggest thing that makes our group safe is our volunteer team. And our volunteer team is amazing. They are doing a lot behind the scenes for the members in the support group and pretty much 24/7. So we have team groups where we talk about everything that's going on in the main page. And there's several different things I'll mention here, but we also have a little bit more extensive list of how we keep our members safe. If you'd like to check that out, it's on our website, speakyourtruth.today/safety. And you can see a more extensive list there, but all of our volunteers are invited to do our ambassador training, which is about 60 hours worth of training. They get trained in mandated reporting, suicide gatekeeping, trauma-informed care, and then their state's 40-hour domestic violence advocacy training. And that training really, really helps because we're dealing with child abuse within our support group. It's occasionally shared, even though it's against the rules publicly to share. It comes to our back end. When people submit a post, we have to approve that. And so occasionally child abuse is shared within the group. And then we occasionally have suicidal members as well. So we're dealing with sensitive stories within our group. And then there's other ways, I could go on with the safety. We try to do as much as possible. So we have what we call admins of the day, and they are scheduled for the morning and the evening of the day. So we pretty much have someone on the Facebook group at all hours of the day. And when they start their shift, they post an announcement saying that they're the admin of the day, and members can reach out to them. We also have what we call moderators, and they are the ones that are monitoring all the commenting in the group. So every post that's approved has to be approved by our admins of the day, and then every comment is screened by moderators. So it keeps it really safe and supportive, making sure everything's following our group rules, everything's helpful and safe for our members. But then also when our volunteers have that trauma-informed care training, that's really, really beneficial for the support group and the members, because they're able to also comment themselves and come from a trauma-informed place and guide our members towards providing the most helpful and educational and encouraging care possible. So we have a couple other features like the anonymous posting feature. We screen all new members. We have a care list that our volunteers manage that has some of our most vulnerable members on there that we check in with and make sure they're okay, as well as lots of other things. So feel free to go check out the speakyourtruth.today/safety.
Thank you so much, Hannah and Kyle. I like how you both kind of broke down the different safety elements depending on the platform being used. I just think that highlights how, everything is going to have its own intricacies. But I appreciate how thorough that response was. And I think our audio may be back with Begonia. Can you want to test it out? I see your hand is raised. Oh, I do not think I can hear you. Let's try that again. Okay, it looks like we still cannot hear your audio. I am so sorry. I'm wondering if one of our No More team members can support them in that. But we will continue and hopefully be able to get back to you and give you the space to share all the incredible insight that you have for us. This next question, I'm going to give it back to Kyle again. I want to hear more examples from how Our Wave and No More Silence encourages survivors to share their experiences comfortably and confidently.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to provide maybe a little bit more context for folks that are listening. So, we created a partnership with No More and Speak Your Truth Today, and then obviously our organization at Our Wave to create this space where survivors could safely and anonymously share their stories. And really the goal with that space is, can we provide survivors with a space where they may not have felt comfortable going before, to share their stories, to access resources, to have best-in-class sort of support through that process, and ideally to connect with other community members that can help them find healing and access educational resources. And so we launched this platform 6 to 9 months ago. I don't remember the exact timeline. And we've collected, I think we're between 50 and 100 stories that have been submitted from all of our communities kind of coming together into one place. And the beauty of this platform is really we allow survivors to also share some tags and some information about their background. Do they have particular identities? Did they come from a particular situation? How do we really cater to the survivor to create these chambers and these groups that have similar experiences so that we can provide them with the best-in-class resources that best align with their needs? And this is sort of a broader interest that we have at Our Wave is just collecting the story base of survivors with all these different experiences and identities. So to give you a few examples of that, we see military survivors with unique needs and experiences. We see, we're working with a partner now called the Shine Collective that's focused on, psychedelic research or psychedelic sexual assault that happens in those spaces and within those communities. We're working with the Dublin Rape Crisis Center that's specifically focused on Ireland and the communities that exist there. So I think that there's this really beautiful opportunity to create these safe spaces for these different groups with these different backgrounds, and then to best align resources that we provide to them, give them community over time, give them, clinically validated education and support, connect them with each other, and really facilitate a space of hope and healing that allows people to sort of work past their trauma. And I would say most importantly, then use their experiences to help other people, which is what we've been most inspired by, is just survivors coming back to us and saying, I want to give back to somebody else the worst, based on the worst thing that ever happened to me. So, that space that we've created with Speak Your Truth Today and No More really provides that space, and we're seeing it grow, which is super, super exciting.
Thank you so much. Before moving on, I want to see, Hannah, did you want to add any other examples about just survivors sharing their stories comfortably or confidently of what you notice, either both in our group and the Our Wave platform?
Yeah, sure. I think again, like the ways that I mentioned earlier, there are very real reasons why survivors turn to online for support. They might feel safer in a lot of ways. I know that a lot of this conference is talking about the negative aspects of technology, and we get to talk about the positive aspects of technology. But I have seen it very powerfully done in our support group. And we have nearly 19,000 members now, and we have a large portion of our group that we like to call lurkers. And so they kind of hang out in the group. They never comment or very rarely react to a story, but they are there and they are reading the post. And almost every single week we have someone that shares. This is my very first time sharing in the group. I have been here for years. You guys have all encouraged me so much. But now it's their turn to share or get advice on something. And so I think that's powerful. I think that we're able to both of our groups and our platforms for support are able to walk with survivors along that journey of seeking healing, and it can be a slow journey, and getting that support whenever they need it. It's always online. I think it just gives that extra layer of accessibility, and yeah, that's my ad.
No, that's an amazing ad. Thank you so much. And I think it also just shows how the platform's created to meet survivors where they are. And no matter how long that takes, we're just going to support them and we'll be ready whenever that is. Kyle, I see you want to jump in. Feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one kind of more specific example I wanted to provide as it relates to some of the points that Hannah and I were making. One example is we had a survivor submit a story to us about 2 years ago. And within the title of their story, they said, I'm a COXA survivor, which is an acronym they used for child-on-child sexual assault. And so they shared that within their title. And then what ended up happening is, based on the way that our platform works, Google indexed that, and that specific title. And what we've actually found out recently is that we're the third result in Google when you search for COXA. So the repercussions of that, the positive repercussions of that, I would say, is that we've received probably 20 to 30 questions from survivors. We have an ability for survivors to ask us questions where they say, a wide variety of different things, but we get some really heavy content that people are curious about that isn't being answered in other places. So I think we've had hundreds of stories submitted based on that story just getting indexed in Google. We've had 20 to 30 questions being asked about survivors who have experienced child-on-child sexual assault that haven't been able to find resources in other places. We've seen this whole sort of movement build around this smaller group of survivors that have these specific identities and tags that we've been able to sort of support more intimately, take a look at the research, pull in certain findings, give the best in class resources. And obviously that's applicable to all these different subgroups, whether it's with the lens of domestic violence, whether it's, like I said, military survivors, whether it's survivors in different geographic regions. I think there's this real beauty in being able to try to meet people where they're at, understand their specific backgrounds, and then do the diligent work of really understanding what's going to be most beneficial to those groups. And I think that's kind of an example of how technology has facilitated that conversation and facilitated really supporting that group with their individual needs.
That's incredible. And also so validating for that person and the survivors who are sharing these parts of themselves that maybe there isn't that representation or information, and you're able to, with your team, get them something that is so supportive and custom.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. I feel like throughout this conversations, we mentioned a few times that there are always barriers that survivors will face. and technology can both be a barrier and help get over those barriers. I want to turn it to Melissa and hear from Melissa about what the challenges and barriers that survivors face in their journey towards recovery, what those look like, and how technology can help address and alleviate those.
Thank you, Taylor. And it's such a joy to be here and to be part of this conversation for a lot of reasons. First of all, at No More, I cannot begin to tell you how proud and thrilled we are to be in this partnership with Hannah, with Kyle, with Speak Your Truth Today, with Our Wave. Having No More Silence has changed how people interact. And for those of us who are survivors, oftentimes we tell our story and then nothing.
Mm.
And the beauty of this is now we share our voice, we bring our voice forward. We can access more help. We can be part of a continuing conversation. So that's where a barrier doesn't exist. But let's get back to your question. There are so many barriers, and I believe that both Hannah and Kyle have mentioned many of them. I think when you hear the survivor journey, when you hear about people with ability challenges, with how we identify, how we align within our society, what are the social expectations of us? What are we supposed to be doing? Is this supposed to be happening to us? Do I even know what this abuse is? Child on child sexual abuse and sexual violence. Am I even aware that that's something that shouldn't be happening? I loved the phrase that you used around lurkers. And around this gets to those of us who were, those of us who are lurkers. I'm going to start with what's the biggest barrier. To me, it's about being believed. We are so brainwashed time and time and time again. No one will believe you. This doesn't happen to somebody who looks like you. This doesn't happen in our family. This doesn't happen to a professional woman. This doesn't happen if you're disabled. This does happen all the time to our society, and nobody's going to believe you anyway, because you know what? It happens to everyone. So it's these social norms that come in and really create this vast barrier. And statistically, I was sharing with a colleague of mine today that a survivor oftentimes tells up to 35 people before they're believed. That is so isolating.
Wow.
That is so frightening. That shuts our voices. So when we're looking at the whole will I be believed scenario, getting to support in an anonymous way, in a way with experts who understand immediately that no matter what, I will be believed. My voice matters. My experience matters. That's critical. That's a lot of why this No More Silence works so well, and this partnership works so well, which is really what No More is about. For over 10 years, it was founded with this approach of collaboration. So we have the whole concept of belief. Then we have the whole barrier around each journey is different. It doesn't look the same. And some people who are survivors don't know that there's something to survive, if that makes sense. So it's the whole identification piece. The family and friends don't see what they're seeing. They may not be able to name what's going on. And sometimes, going back to the lurker, they're getting knowledge. They're looking at some of these stories and saying, that's me. That sounds like me. I matter. I can do something about this. we have to remember as well, and something that Hannah has mentioned a couple times today and Kyle has as well, face-to-face can be really confronting. It's hard enough to admit that this is going on. It's hard enough to face the social shame. And there is no shame in being alive, but I can say that being on the other side of this as a survivor and thriver, and I can't stand labels, but there we go. So face-to-face is really confronting. So when we need that support, when we need to be believed, it's about being able to get there. And sometimes going online matters. Now, I hate to say this, but I'm going to use a fabulous example that shows how old I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this intergenerational piece comes in.
It's important.
How did I get safe? I kind of thought I knew what was going on, but I picked up a phone and I called a shelter in my area. And the first question was, are you safe? And I couldn't answer that.
Mm.
Technology at that time was a phone. Do you know how wonderful it is to know that we can go here, that we can go to different parts, that we can explore not only our own selves, but also look at those barriers. And technology platforms really get at the heart of being believed, not being isolated, being respected for ourselves, and also that we're not going to try over and over again, because the more we tell people, what happens is it then cuts our ability to get help. So again, going to statistics, the amount of time that one is abused may be lessened. And we're hearing stories that are real, that are life affirming. And I hope that helps, because when we are believed, when our voices matter, when our experience is validated, then we can listen to our sisters and brothers and understand that there are ways that we can be free. And it begins this whole journey of I can heal, I can be better, I can have a life without it. Being a victim is not all that I am. And that comes from, when you're talking about barriers, a lot of that comes from being able to be on some of these new technologies, such as this one, and the ones we're talking about today. I hope that answers your question.
It did more than just answer my question. That was so I want to go off on so many points you went on there, but yes, always the ideal. But I want to thank you for bringing so many different points into the space. And I thank you for sharing that statistic too about how many times it takes someone to be believed after they disclose. I wasn't familiar with that one. It's very jarring, honestly. I do want to open the space for anyone else if they wanted to jump in to talk about how they think technology can help get over other barriers that they've witnessed. Okay, Kyle, I knew. I had a feeling.
Yeah, I want to jump in just quickly to say, no more speak your truth today. The other thing that I wanted to sort of add a point to is just the partnerships that, No More and others are building in this space is, there are different tools in the toolkit. And, to reflect on some of the same points that were made, I think that oftentimes the first place people go is online when they're seeking support for something extremely sensitive. And I think the statistics show that actually 90% of users aren't using in-person resources, right? For a variety of reasons, right? Geographic location, the types of resources available, all these different reasons. So I think there's a real beauty and opportunity in providing these, these handoffs and these partnerships and these movements together. We've worked extensively with Me Too International and Chen and No More and all these groups that are earnestly, Callisto's another tech-focused organization that are all earnestly focused on something that's a little bit different to support survivors. And it's been amazing just having conversations with these folks to not only learn from each other, but also to say, hey, how do we integrate with what you're doing? How do we pipe data to you so that we can understand these patterns and support people more? So we're really seeing this sort of coalition effort building, which has been really amazing to give these different experiences and support to survivors in different capacities. And I'm really excited to continue that work. I think finding other folks, in sort of such an isolating space has been so amazing to work more closely with.
Yes, that's incredible. I do feel like the collaborative efforts going on are helping bring the community together and not working in such silos where we're all putting all of this energy doing similar things. It's like coming together and doing it together. I want to pass it back to Begonia. I see you joined us again. Let's test this audio out. I'm getting some.
Let's do the last try.
Yes, the last try worked. Yes, yes. Thank you for persisting and coming back. So let me take no more time and just jump back to you and see if you're ready to share about the app you've been working on and just, talk about the app and how it brings folks together.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for your patience. I have to say that I'm joining from my working device and it's really restrictive. But thanks very much to the organizers and No More team to support me to sort it out. I wanted to share with you what Nokanens means. Nokanen, which is a very difficult, weird name to pronounce for people not living in Southern Africa. Nokanen is the name in Basotho language, which is the language that it is spoken in Lesotho, Southern Africa. It means the place in the river where women go to get together. Is where normally they will go to do their laundry or they will go to also do their hygiene. They get together, they connect, is a space is a women-only space. And we got that idea, that's why we put that name of a safer space. And I'm sorry that I was on and off, sorry, but I could relate to some of the experiences that the other speakers were here sharing. The importance of providing a safe space for breaking the silence. Also, in my case, I want to emphasize the importance to create something, listening to what the users need. And in our case is the local community in a developing country. And this means, for example, that we had to look for a solution that was zero rated because our potential users, not always they will have the economic means, first of all, to have a fancy smartphone, second of all, to afford data, to be connected. So on that note, also not only we have the app, but we created also an SMS-based solution because we saw that our potential users, they still use very much SMS in their local communities. Overall, we provide through the app space to also promote the culture of being safe, of safety, of support. I heard from my colleagues here sharing their experiences about how to do not harm, how to make sure that the space is really safe, anonymized. In our case, and I also heard about partnerships, and I really resonate with that. because through partnerships, not only Vodacom in this case is providing us the platform for having digital solution that doesn't consume any data for the users, but then we also partnered with a local NGO that they provide through a moderated chat. That is one of the features of the app, the support, the advice they need. But in order to make it safe, it is created in a way that the inputs are not directly put in the website, but are received by the NGO. They look through it. I have to say, Lesotho is a 2 million inhabitants country only. So chances are that if you are talking about your case and you say, I was here, I met that, then I went to that shop, maybe that shop is the only one in that country, that you could be already putting you in a greater risk because you could be identified. So our colleagues from the NGO, local NGO speaking the local language, they receive these messages, they work through it, they delete every information that could serve to identify that person, but they leave everything that for the other users might be helpful, and then they reply to that message and they post it online. So yes, once again, thank you for your patience and sorry for the back and forth. From what I heard from the questions, this is what I could relate to, and I give it back to you. And I'm so happy it's working out finally. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And that was such good insight about the app and everything it serves. I really love how you highlighted that you listen to the survivors and you're basing it off of that. I think that is just key. I think that's key. And I think that's what makes all of these platforms and this partnership so successful, because at the center of it, it really is we're listening to survivors and what they want and what they need. So thank you for sharing that. I want to switch gears a little bit, send it back to Melissa. Melissa, I would love to hear you speak about what ways the innovative strategies and approaches that we talked today align with the foundational principles of the shelter and refuge movement and how they can be adapted and integrated into the digital realm. Thinking more macro.
This is a fabulous question. The similarities are amazing in that the women's movement and the idea of the shelter refuge movement share the synergies of women's voices and believing women. And it is grounded in that experience. The experience of women, no matter what, is believed. And women creating safe spaces for each other. So you're building on the women supporting women, on building safe spaces, spaces to heal and to come together. And that is reflected, taking it back to how can technology integrate that, in that we must build on the needs and the experiences of survivors, which many of us have already mentioned. We've also mentioned that survivors support each other. In that shelter refuge movement, we learn, we grow from each other. Again, I will relate a small story from my experience. The first shelter I went to, it was only for a few hours because there was no room. There was no national coordinated response in the United States. And there was a young woman there who was probably about 16 years old. Her child was about 2 years old in the crib. She had bruises and burn marks, and the child had a cast on her arm and on both legs. And I remember the woman looked at me, and I just couldn't believe that this was going on. And why am I sitting in a shelter? And she looked at me and she said, leopards don't change their spots. I was 28. This girl was 16, and she was my mentor. She empowered me. She enabled me to move forward. So that's really part of that grounding. So survivors know when stillness needs a voice. And that's the other thing that this technology can do, is the survivors help to build that voice in a space where sometimes you don't feel that there's a voice. We realize these connections can be made. Actively listening, remembering that professional voices are fed by survivors is really, really key. So to me, those foundational principles of collaboration, listening, grounding your work, and also when we as women were not believed, and I am of that generation, we were not believed. And so the women's movement really helped us. I remember marching with my mother back in the 60s and 70s. We also acknowledge today that children are affected, that non-binary people are affected, that people with disabilities and vulnerabilities, that Indigenous peoples, that men and boys are impacted. So that's the other way that tech can come in and support. And I hope that helps to answer and expand the conversation.
It absolutely does. And I'll leave some space for other folks if they wanted to chime in as well.
I'll hop in for a little bit. I just piggybacking off of what Melissa was just saying, the different people groups, that experience harm in various ways. There's all commonalities, but I think some of these groups have a harder time finding shared stories. And that's what's so beautiful about technology, is that we can offer that. We're offering that with No More Silence, Speak Your Truth, and the tagging system that we're able to, or that Kyle has been able to create there. But then also in our support group, we've been gender inclusive from the beginning. And I remember when we first started, Taylor shared in my bio that my story went viral, and we, when it went viral, I was receiving all of these messages and comments from people on my original post that were either, experiencing abuse and realizing that they were experiencing abuse in my post, or wanting to share their own stories. And I was very overwhelmed. And so that's when I kind of was like, all these people just need to talk to each other and encourage each other. So that's when I made the Facebook group, and I added it into the original post that was still going viral. So we actually had about 12,000 members in 2 weeks, which was insane, and was like floodgates at the beginning. And I remember there being this very real fear of, is there men allowed in this group? And we kind of had to decide on our end whether we keep it the gender inclusive that we had decided to start with, or if we segment the groups. And we decided, no, everyone is healing and everyone deserves a space to heal. And it's really turned into this beautiful, now over time, we've been able to moderate well and get people into our group that have no other place to share, or don't feel like they have any other place to share. And some of those, survivors are oftentimes men that turn to the online space because they don't have a lot of support in real life. So just wanted to add that.
No, thank you so much, Hannah, for adding that. I think that's important. And also feel free to unmute yourself and jump on in, Begonia, as well. I see your hand there.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to add additional aspects to the conversation. On the one hand, we are here sharing experiences of potential solutions as responses to survivors or victims. I want to add also the focus on prevention. Our app actually was conceptualized as a prevention tool. By sharing, by learning from others, you can prevent violence to reoccur if already happened on the first place. And that, I think, is a very powerful also aspect and tool to tap on. at the end of the day, the best way of eliminate gender-based violence is to prevent it from occurring in the first place. The other aspect I want to share with you is that our app was actually launched even before the pandemic. And that was, we experienced such a demand for the app during the pandemic times. And more, we live in a very volatile environment. It's not me here wanted to have another pandemic so we get more uses, not at all, please don't take me wrong. But again, from the prevention point of view, readiness, on different crises that in this volatile context we are facing, I think is an add-on also to this kind of digital solutions. And last but not least, I think while I was coming in and out, I heard some of the panelists here talking about partnership. And I want to emphasize that very key aspects also, and exemplify it by sharing our experience that by now, although we were the driven force to create the app and to put it in place and to make social marketing on the app, we have handed over this app. We are not the owners, and we could only do that because we had for years strong partnerships on the ground. So that's, I think, a very important aspect in terms of sustainability, because one can have the impulse to create something, the novelty, the generating, is exciting, is thrilling, a new idea, but then who's going to maintain it? Who is going to make it sustainable? It needs some knowledge, it needs some dedication. In some cases, it needs resources. So thinking about that from the beginning and building solid partnerships from the beginning, I think is key to the success of this, in the long term, very useful digital solutions for GBV. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Go ahead, Kyle and Melissa, if you both want to wrap up your last thoughts, and then we'll end the session for today, but would love to hear what you want to add to that beautiful answer.
Yeah, I'll be real quick. I mostly wanted to just reiterate a few of the points that were just made. Absolutely, I think our long-term goal is also focused around prevention. How do we take this anonymous data and these communities that we're building, and how do we break that cycle? How do we really try to support people before these things happen, affect policy? Like, how do we support in all these different capacities? And the other thing that I also strongly wanted to triple, double, reiterate, was that these communities support every survivor that comes to us, and they should support every survivor that comes to us. Now, it doesn't mean that some organizations don't have more capacity to focus on a particular group or subsect of the broader survivor movement. But in our perspective, and at least as far as we're concerned, survivorship and this entire movement is so different for so many groups of people. So how do we both foster, this wave of change, that's our name and all, but, across this broader movement, but then also how do we leave space for these individual communities and give more pertinent resources for those subgroups? We've seen amazing things come out of, male survivors, folks that have come from religious institutions, people of different political backgrounds, different ideologies, cultures, geographic areas. And I think there's a real beauty to facilitating, both similarities and differences between those groups as we build this momentum together.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Kyle. Okay, go ahead, Melissa. I see you unmuted.
I'm just going to be very, very quick here. And that is this concept. Yes, I'm completely behind the prevention and the partnerships. That's what No More is about. It's in our blood. It's what we were born from. It's why we were born. Sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
If people will come, if it is built, and if it is there, and if it remains there, and if we listen, and if we participate, and if we empower. but we can't have one flashy thing to the next. It's about knowing we can get there. So I just, if we go there, we're going to be heard. It's going to be actioned. We can move forward. That's my point. So sustainability, great.
Yes. Also sustainability, great. And that's it. That's how we're ending today's session. I want to thank our amazing panelists for just sharing your insight, your stories, and your expertise with all of us and going with the flow of this session. Thank you, everybody who attended. Our next session is taking place in just 2 minutes, and it's going to be the Internet of Things, how online abuse is getting simpler. But thanks, y'all.